So let go, my soul, and trust in him. That almost summarizes what I want to say this morning. So let go, my soul, trust in him, and it is well with my soul. So this morning, we're continuing with our practice of generosity. And this morning is the second in our series, and it's Watch Out for Greed. And I don't know about you, but the birthday present thing that I did with the young people worked far too well. Worryingly well. It's almost insidious, isn't it? What the world is doing, what greed does. And yeah, it was worrying. So I want to start again by just playing Hamster, okay, for those that are here last week. If you weren't here last week, be prepared. Okay, this is a song written by John Glyde. It was part of a 12-song challenge that he does and has been doing for a while, I think. And one of the challenges was to write they're supposed to be contemporary worship. No, it's supposed to be congregational worship songs, I think. But John likes to think outside the box a little bit. And I think this was the theme of sort of a worldwide theme, sort of different cultures type thing. So, but yeah, the words are really powerful. I think they really sort of summarize in a way what God's calling us to in this practice of generosity. So we'll just play this to start off. So that was one thing sort of God put in my heart for this morning. The other thing is something I read a long time ago. And this book is a story or a biography of Tony Hendra, who was Spitting Image. He was one of the creators of Spitting Image back in the 80s, I believe. And he had a mentor called Father Joe. I think he lived in a monastery on the Isle of Wight, and a Benedictine monk. And I just want to read a little excerpt from this, just to, again, set the scene a little bit and maybe let God speak to you through it. So bear with me. I'm just going to read from this. So Tony Hendra was sort of questioning possessions and things like this. And yeah. So I took pleasure in many things: music, art, films, decent food and drink when I could wangle it. When it came to such consumer necessities as clothes, cars, hairstyles, and the rest, the teenage monk tended to kick in. But it was hard to avoid the novelty and force of the marketing that pushed them into your consciousness. And I would oscillate wildly between wistful yearning for just a taste of such temptations and rigid puritanical rejection of everything the late 50s had to offer. So we're back in the late 50s, and even then, he's wondering about all of this advertising and things. More significant was that I found myself fascinated by the process by which things were sold to people, by advertising and marketing, especially on television, which seemed both morally insidious and creatively brilliant. I asked Father Joe for guidance on the question of possessions. We started with St. Benedict's rule and the vows I would one day take. Chapter 23, dear, if memory serves. No one may presume to retain anything as his own, nothing at all, not even a book, writing tablets, or a stylus. All things shall be the common possessions of all. Very well, Father. Right now, I'm ready to give up all my worldly goods. Sports jacket, one, handed down from Dad, who is far too fat for it. Bike, one, peeling chrome and broken bell included. Flaminaire cigarette lighter, one, designed to impress contemporaries at the Albert Hall during promenade concerts. Well, I have to say, this sounds a lot like communism. St. Benedict doesn't want your cigarette lighter, dear, and he's not a communist. At least I don't think so. Though, now you mention it, he does sound like one, doesn't he? St. Benedict is trying to say that owning things, something that the world takes for granted, in fact insists is a right, has important spiritual consequences. Possessions are extensions of the self, you see. they become the walls of that prison of the self you talked about once. The more possessions, the less likely will be your release from the prison. In our community, property is forbidden because it gets in the way of love and trust between its members. If every man had his own private property, the community would just be a collection of individual prisons, wouldn't it? I found this far more persuasive than the puritanical approach, vanity of all vanities is vanity. Father Joe's analysis of the nature of ownership was much shrewder. The marketeer's true target, after all, is the self. Self is the beginning and end of selling. This product will extend yourself out into the impressionable world. The more of those fine products you have, the more formidable yourself. And of course, the more barriers you have set up to clear and open contact with the other. Shop till you drop, and true love may well be mutually exclusive. Father Joe stressed that his analysis didn't mean owning things was wrong, any more than the pleasures you derived from them was wrong, which went back to the old principle, contempus mundi, which was not contempt for the world, but detachment from it. It all depends on how you see your possessions, dear, and the pleasures they give. You must be able to give them up without a moment's without a moment's regret. I found that quite interesting, especially this idea self is the beginning and end of selling. This product will extend yourself out into an impressionable world. Wasn't it interesting the reasons the children were given, and Pete was given, for wanting the next best thing, His iPhone's better than my iPhone, and all this sort of stuff. And, it's sort of this, I suppose, hamster on the wheel thing that the song talks about, and constantly wanting more. And this advertising is, obviously impacting our young people, obviously impacting their parents maybe, obviously impacting all of us, whether we recognize it or not. I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes it's been quite scary, the advertising I get. I've been talking about something with someone, and suddenly, on my phone, the next advert, the next thing that comes up is for that thing. It's been listening to me. You might think, oh, that's what's happening. Anyone else had any sort of examples of that? Anyone want to share some of the really weird ones that have happened? No? Okay. Right. And so he's just got lots and lots of adverts for Jet2 holidays. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think, I think paddle boards and things, just really strange things when you're talking about paddle boarding or something like that. Suddenly paddle boards come up in the news feed and things like this. It's, it really is quite scary. So the world we live in, experts say that we see on average 5,000 advertisements a day, all designed to appeal not to our rational brain, because consumerism is not rational at all, but to our subconscious, to our fears and desires. And now all of that advertising is amplified by algorithms designed to data mine for our deepest fears, insecurities, questions, hopes, and dreams by watching all we do and listening to everything we say from our front pocket. Harvard professor Shoshana Zuboff calls this new economic model surveillance capitalism. And that's the world we live in. And that's the world that's affecting us, whether we recognize it or not. It is having an effect on us. But even before our era of digital manipulation, the human heart has long been prone to believe the myth of more, the lie that if we just had a little bit more, then we would be happy, which is basically that treadmill that we have been on. Okay? This idea of being on the hamster wheel, we're just sort of striving, we're running for that little bit more, but it never really satisfies. No matter how much we get, it's never enough. The writer of Ecclesiastes said as much thousands of years ago, whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. In fact, the general rule is the more we get, the more we want. And there's a famous quote from Rockefeller, When the oil tycoon was asked how much money is enough, he said, just a little bit more. And psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. Hedonic treadmill. And in a way, it's very easy to get trapped on that treadmill. But even worse, the more we get, the more neurotic we become. And this is counterintuitive insight of Jesus. We think money will make us happy, but often not only does it not make us happy, it often makes us less happy, more anxious, distracted, discontent, and lonely. And we'll look at that in a little bit more detail as we go through. So, this is the current state of affairs in the West. We live in the most affluent generation in human history, yet so many of us are racked by fear, worry, greed, and unsatisfied desire. Oh, that's depressing, isn't it? But it's true. It comes no surprise then that the majority of Jesus' teachings on money are warnings about the danger of it. So let's look at a few examples. So, Jesus said to them in Luke 12:15, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." So greed is a little bit like lust. It's a lust for things. It's an insatiable desire for more than we have and more than we need. And Jesus is right. There are all kinds of greed. There's crass materialism. You know, the bigger house, the bigger car, the better iPhone, the, the drone. I'll use a few of my examples. The better drone, the better drum kit, the better. I'm not going to pick on Peter all morning. The better. Oh, okay. Thanks, Chris. The better, the better computer, the better. The better house, all these different things. If we just had that, that would make us happy. And often, it might not just be about possessions, it might be about experiences, the exotic travel, getting about, the fashion. But we're all vulnerable to some sort of greed. And that's why Jesus says, watch out. Why? It's because greed's so bad, because life does not consist in abundance of possessions. Okay, so as we said, greed is like lust, but for things. It's insatiable desire for more than we have and more than we need. Okay, so life doesn't consist in the abundance of possessions, but that's not where the good life. So that's not where the good life is to be found. But it's not only wealth is dangerous, but when we read Mark 4, and this is if you like, the parable of the sower, still others, like seed thrown among thorns. Okay, and I'm sure we can all relate to the thorns that are all around us. The worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desire for other things come in and choke the word, making it unfruitful. So wealth is deceitful, says Jesus. He doesn't say wealth is evil, he says it's deceitful. Why? Because it promises what it cannot give. It promises happiness, contentment, identity, and a felt sense of safety and security. And we fall for the lie again and again. Yet wealth is often what is keeping us from the good life. Okay, Jesus wants us to have life and life in all its abundance. And often we fall for the lie that having more, having wealth, having more possessions, having more experiences is the way to the good life. But it's actually more like this prison that Father Joe was talking about. Possessions are extensions of the self, you see. They become the walls that the prison of the self you talked about once. The more possessions, the less likely you're released from the prison. Question: how much time, energy, and resources do you spend researching, acquiring, and then looking after your possessions? That could include things like experiences, like holidays, eating out, going to shows. So for me, there are a few. Joe will attest to this. I get little obsessions. Okay, I think, oh, a drone. I'd really like a drone. Okay, I don't really need a drone, but I'd like a drone, and so I'll spend time researching drones. I'll spend time thinking, well, what's the best one to get? I'll spend time going through eBay finding the best value drone. I'll spend time then going down to I think it was Newport in the end, to go and buy the drone. I'll spend time then coming back and thinking, oh no, I need some more batteries for this drone. I'll spend time on eBay again, buying more batteries for the drone. And eventually I'll fly the drone, and then I'll spend time flying the drone, and then I'll spend time editing the videos on the drone, or not, as the case may be. And then the drone, after a few days and weeks, just stays in its box for months on end. Brought maybe a little bit of happiness for a few days, but now it's just in the box. I might get it out again one day, but how many of those sorts of things can you relate to? Those things that we want rather than things that we need. There's all sorts of things for me that, I have, a couple of years ago, it's a hi-fi system, or it might be, this year it's a turn. There's so many sort of little things which you can get sort of, I don't know, drawn into. And therefore, actually, you think it's going to bring you some satisfaction, you think it's going to bring you some happiness, but actually, eventually you just leaves you feeling empty. And, oh no, I've got one more thing to worry about. It's like a time tax on owning things. You ever thought about that? It's not just the purchase cost, there's a time tax, spending time on it, using the item, caring for this item. I suppose it's a little like, every Sunday I see the people outside washing their cars and things. It's everything we possess, we need to spend time doing these things, okay? Especially if we buy it on, a tick or whatever, if we're still paying for it, we still have to work for it. We have to spend time, doing extra things to keep this working, So, we use the item, caring for the item, repairing the item, keeping working to fund the item. So the more we get, the less time we have. So we might become materialistically rich, but we become time poor. Then we become hurried. Then we become stressed and anxious and exhausted. So we've got this doom loop of Western materialism, and it's so profound. Yeah? So my question is, your possessions, okay, do you own them, or do they own you? How much time do you spend even just sorting out your possessions? How much time do you spend decluttering? I don't know. You guys are much better than me, but I know I can be a little bit of a hoarder, and then Jo gets really cross with me. And she eventually throws stuff out without me knowing about it, and then maybe 6 months later when I notice, she'll actually say, oh yeah, I threw that out ages ago. And I go, oh, but I needed it now. But I didn't really. Yeah, so and Jesus said to us, that's a deceitfulness to wealth, yeah? It's it's deceiving you. And Jesus said to his disciples in Matthew 19, truly I tell you, it's hard for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. Here, wealth is an obstacle to the good life, not the path. It's possible to follow Jesus into the kingdom and carry wealth with you, but it's very hard to do. Of course, all of us want to believe that we are the exception to the rule, but most people couldn't do it, but I could. But Jesus' warning is haunting. Financial success can equal spiritual failure. And that's an idea you rarely hear in our culture. But it's actually profoundly biblical. There's a high correlation between accumulation of wealth and spiritual decline, which is why the way to Jesus' teaching on money is a warning against greed. And the weird thing about greed is very few of us think of ourselves as greedy. We tend to unconsciously adopt the spending norms of our culture, and we live in one of the most greedy, materialistic cultures in history. And hence we're often like the proverbial frog in water. We don't realize it's killing our soul. So, after that really uplifting start to the sermon, is there a practice of Jesus that's going to set our hearts free from greed and form us into people who are deeply happy and at peace with what we have? And that is the practice of generosity. And this is, if you like, this alternative reality the hamster song is talking about: open hands rather than clenched fists, rather than trying to hold on to what we've got. being willing to release it, to bless. So, open hands, let go of the system. Open hands, break the cage of the hamster wheel that we're in. Yeah? So, Jesus says in Luke 11, verse 39, Jesus says to the Pharisees, "You Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness." So wickedness is a generic term, but greed is very specific. Notice the one sin Jesus calls out by name is greed. But then he says this, but now as for what is inside you, the foul greed in your heart, be generous to the poor, and everything will be clean for you. Meaning that there is this silver bullet for greed, and it's called generosity. Okay? So, contentment is the key. So it's true that the more we get, the more we want, but the reverse is also true. The more we give, the more happy and at peace we become. The used word by the biblical authors for the inner satisfaction is contentment, and it's one of the most underestimated virtues in the world. If greed is being unsatisfied and racked by the desire for more, contentment is the opposite. It's being deeply happy with and grateful for what you have. It's being free of the desire for more. And one of the hallmark passages in the New Testament brings all this together in 1 Timothy 6, verses 6 to 11 and 17 to 19. But godliness with contentment is great gain. Meaning true wealth is not having a lot, but being happy in God and content with what you have. For we brought nothing into the world and can take nothing out of it. So, the saying goes, you can't take it with you. All wealth is temporary. Either you'll lose it the day you die, or way before that. Either. But if we have clothing and food, we will be content with that. And the Greek word translated clothing literally means covering. The idea is, if we have the basics of life, food, clothing, shelter, as long as we have God and each other, that's enough. That's enough. So those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And that last line is often misquoted as the love of money is the root of all evil. It's not. The NIV's translation is excellent. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, meaning it's the evil underneath so many of the evils in our soul and our society. Money itself is not evil. It can do great evil, but it can also do great good. So I think think of the power not only of generosity, but of business to make the world a better place. And I'm going to give you a few examples of how business has helped make the world a better place in a minute. But money isn't neutral either. It's powerful. It's a little bit like nuclear energy. We can use nuclear energy to bring life or death. Okay, we can use nuclear energy to provide the energy we need to keep houses warm and stuff, but we can also use nuclear energy to make bombs to bring huge amounts of destruction. Or a little bit like Frodo's ring in Tolkien's classic The Lord of the Rings. Purest of heart could stand a chance of not being corrupted by its power, and even then it's a weight on the soul that tends to deform the inner person. Money, love, is far more dangerous than most of us realize, and hence the next line. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. And this is dramatic language. Yeah, it's pierced themselves with many pangs, or wounded themselves with many sorrows, caused themselves unfold agonies of mind. And you may have seen this if you've ever watched someone gain wealth. I mean, the stories that you hear of people winning the lottery, and actually it doesn't make them happier. It causes them to be a lot less happy, doesn't it? So, these warnings of Jesus are incredibly true. Not only does money not make people happy, it's often the root of all kinds of evil. And so this is where I think that phrase from the song, Uh, so let go my soul and trust in him. Is God enough for us? Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. So is God enough? We often admire the quality of being self-sufficient. Whether that's in ourselves, we like to be self-sufficient ourselves, don't we? Or whether it's in others. But the key to contentment is recognizing that Christ is our sufficiency. We are not enough. That might be surprising, but we are not enough. And we should admit that we lack the power, knowledge, the moral strength, the stability, and the necessary to be self-dependent. Yeah? I recognize that in myself. I'm not enough. I can't do it myself. I need God. Is God enough, though? Is God enough for me to maybe, there are some really challenging questions, but is God enough? God is an unwavering source of security and contentment. We can't keep our money and possessions, and even while we have them, they are pitifully insufficient to satisfy our souls. C.S. Lewis said this: "He who has God and everything has no more than he who has God only." He who has God and everything else has no more than he who has God only. This goes back to what Alex was saying a couple of weeks back. We can have this abundance mindset, where if you have an abundance mindset, you look out at the world and you see a world of abundance. You see God as your father and provider, yourself as his child, and all of life as a gift. This is our Father's world, and it's teeming with more than enough for everyone. You look around and say with Jesus, "Look at the birds," and as a result, you live with gratitude. Or you could have a scarcity mindset. You look out at the world and you see a world of lack. There's no father provider. You're on your own. The world is a dangerous place. Human civilization is a fierce battle over scarce resources. Wealth is a zero-sum game. You need to look out for number one because the dog-eat-dog world out there. Your vision is focused on what you have, but you are scared you may lose, or what you don't have and you want. Your heart is consumed by fear and greed. Is God enough? That's a challenge. Paul goes on in Timothy to say, "Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they will take hold of the life that is truly life." Being rich comes with responsibility. 500 years ago, God raised up William Tyndale to be an English preacher, but he also raised up Humphrey Monmouth. Who's heard of Humphrey Monmouth then? Who's heard of William Tyndale? Okay. Well, Humphrey Monmouth was a wealthy cloth merchant who joined forces with Tyndale to steer the nation back to faith with Jesus. God used Tyndale to provide 6 million English speakers with their first English translations of the Bible. God used Monmouth to fund Tyndale, strategize with him, and smuggle Bibles into hostile England. Money can be a force for good. 250 years ago, God used Lady Hutchington and her connections in higher society to bring good news to England's aristocracy in conjunction with George Whitefield. Their partnership gave Whitefield a powerful preaching platform to reach not only to Britain's elite, but thereafter to bring gospel to 80% of the American colonies. Likewise, John Newton, Amazing Grace, was financed by John Thornton. Who's heard of John Thornton? Newton was a patriarch to the next generation of England's church leaders, including William Wilberforce, who brought an end to the slave trade. We are all rich in this country. So all of us are rich, and we'll talk about that again in a minute. How can we do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share? That's what Paul's commanding us to do. So the solution, as we've said, is contentment. Okay? Randy Alcorn defines contentment as being satisfied in whose you are, who you are, and what you have. Those who love and serve Jesus can be truly content. Those who love and serve money can never be. To be content is to realize you have enough. Even more is to be happy with what you have. So, this is a beautiful definition of contentment. So, contentment through the practice of generosity. Problem is, I think I'll be content when I get a raise, or buy a home, or get through this season. That's not how contentment works. We can be happy here and now through the practice of generosity. So these are the two things. Giving is God's antidote to greed. The more we give away, the less control money will have over our hearts. Number 2, to simplify our life. To edit it down to the essentials of what really matters. I'm not going to go into that more. You'll have to do the generosity course because I haven't got time this morning. But again, to simplify our life is another really powerful thing. And G.K. Chesterton says this: there are 2 ways to get enough. One is to continue to accumulate more and more. The other is to desire less. And that's basically the idea of simplicity. So in conclusion, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God said, I will never leave you, never will I forsake you. Do we trust God enough? This alternative reality, God's kingdom delivers the key. Voluntary wealth distribution. Open hands. Let go of the system. Wealth is relative. It's society-wide. The poorest 5% of Americans are wealthier than something like 99% of the world. But they don't feel wealthy. Happiness in nations is often correlated to the lack of income disparity. So you might have a higher happiness level in many African nations where there are very similar income levels across the board. Likewise, Scandinavian countries are rich, but they're happy because there isn't an income disparity, whereas nations like America, South Africa, and England, where there is a really high disparity in wealth, have lower levels of society-wide happiness. Voluntary wealth distribution can be a solution. There's a correlation between wealth and happiness up to about middle class. Okay, so if you are in poverty, then you're going to be less happy, and money, getting you out of poverty, will make you happier. But it only goes up to maximum sort of middle class. I think in America, it was around about, once you're earning about $120,000, and that sounds like a lot of money, but once you get to that stage, above that, there's no more correlation. Once you got there, you've plateaued. You're as happy as money can get you. And in fact, having more money, often, because of possessions and things, makes you less happy. So, I think God has provided enough resources for the people of this world to be happy. I don't know, I've not managed to see John's sermon on tithing and things, and he was all these comparisons about, if everyone gave 10% and the number of people that the church could employ and all this sort of stuff. But God has provided enough resource for the people of this world to be happy. If we've got an abundance mindset, there is enough resources in this world. What is the thing that is stopping everyone's basic needs being met? It's greed. Greed is what is stopping everyone's basic needs being met. And we are here called to spread that message and to show that actually generosity is the answer. Because it's not accumulation of more that's going to make you happy. It's actually giving away. This is wealth distribution. Open hands. Let go of the system. Don't let the system of this world, all the advertising and everything else, fool you. Okay? Let go. Trust God that He is enough. And that if He calls us to be generous, be bold enough and trust Him enough. Let go my soul and trust in Him. Amen? Right, while the band come up, I'm just going to play Hamster one more time, and then we're going to finish in song.